My name is Leslie John Pye, Leslie John
What is your birthday?
10th of May 1931.
And where were you born?
I was born in Auckland.
Auckland. And tell me about your family background when you were growing up, when you were a child, your parents and your siblings.
In growing up, I saw very little of my father, and so I was raised by my mother mainly.
How about your siblings?
My brother, an elder brother, and there was another mid-brother who passed on, and then I became the last of the siblings.
I see.
But my elder brother served in the Second World War in the Royal New Zealand Air Force and did his 30 tours over Europe and returned home in 1945.
Do you care for water?
No, I'm fine.
Are you fine? Okay.
Yeah.
And so tell me about the school you went through.
The school, I did primary school in Auckland. We then shifted to the North Shore of Auckland, and I completed the rest of my education through to 1948 at Northcote College.
Also, you went to college?
Yeah.
Is that high school? Or
high school,
high
yes,
school?
Yes.
And tell me about this question. Did you know anything about Korea before? Did you learn anything from school about Korea?
Mainly from broadcast news during the Second World War, and the fact that it had been invaded by Japan. And
so you knew about that?
Yes.
Very good,
yes.
Actually. But nothing more than that?
No.
No. So after you graduated 1948, what did you do?
I went directly into the Army in what was known as the Regular Force Cadet Unit. It was a new unit set up in the New Zealand Army, which took aged 15 and a half up to 17, and they were to become the tradespeople for the Army, and this would go on until 1991. Each year they would take about 100 in intake. And I was in the first intake and graduated top of class.
Top of the class? You
Yes,
must be a pretty good student. Yeah?
Well, during the college we had what was called the school cadets, and it was we had Army instructors came along, and during that time they taught me to drive, and I was also a gun sergeant on a 40mm Bofors gun, and we ended up winning a prize for our gun crew effort on that. So most of my holidays were spent in camps, going to army camps for instructions.
So you are the elite soldier.
Yes.
And so where did you get the basic military training?
Basic military training was in Trentham.
Could you spell it?
Trentham.
Trentham.
In Wellington.
It's in Wellington.
Yes.
And what kind of basic military training did you receive?
We had virtually a full year of military training.
1 year?
1 year,
Wow.
yes. And this included all aspects, both the basic, although most of the the class. There were 90 in my original class. Most of them had been in the school cadets. Most of them knew left, right.
Very basic.
And so they'd all had that training, and it was much easier on the instructors themselves, of who we had a fine bunch of men.
And then, when did you leave for Korea?
Once I'd finished my cadet training, I was posted to the Armoured Corps, and I went to Waiouru, and there over a space of 9 months did my basic armour and instructor courses in gunnery, driving and maintenance, and signals.
So when did you leave for Korea?
I did not leave for Korea but, at that stage, but I trained the intake that came in for the initial body that went to Korea. So I was with them, that was in Papakura, and I was there for their basic training, in which mainly I was on what we call the bull ring, foot drill.
Yeah.
Then I went to Waiouru for their core training and trained artillery drivers. Following that, I returned to my unit, and it wasn't until August of 1952 I was warned that I would be posted to K-Force in October of that year.
So you arrived in Korea October
In October, I was posted to Waiouru, and I had to retrain as an artillery signaller. And this was because I was coming from regular force to the emergency force. And having undertaken that training, I was under the understanding that when the next reinforcement to mine went up to Korea, then I would be able to go to the British tank unit, which was, I'm sorry.
It's okay, no problem.
To the British tank unit, the 1st Royal Tanks, which was in action at that time in Korea.
Yeah.
So I left New Zealand on the 28th of January, 1953.
Yes.
And arrived in Korea on the 3rd of March, 1953.
Where? Busan?
Busan, yes.
So tell me about the Busan for the first time you saw. How was Korea look to you at the time, overall? Detail.
We smelt Busan before we birthed.
What kind of smell are you talking
Oh,
about?
it was...
Fish? Bad?
Yeah, it was. It was a very crowded port. Yeah, so it wasn't a good impression arriving. No.
To be honest, right?
Yeah, yes, yeah.
How was it? How people looked?
Well, they didn't look overly happy. There was a lot of very makeshift housing. Some entrepreneurs had got into the job of taking American beer cans and turning them into what we call corrugated steel. And you could read all the different brands of beer on the roofs of these particular houses. Yeah. They're all very flimsy. Still a lot of war damage on those buildings that were
So from Busan, where did you go?
We went by rail overnight into Seoul, into an area that was called the Forward Marshalling Area.
Forward what?
Forward Marshalling
Marshalling, okay.
Area.
What is it?
That's where they divided up the reinforcement draft for the units that they were to go to.
Ah,
So I was posted to 16th New Zealand Field Regiment.
yeah. What did you do then?
And along with the remainder from there, we were then taken forward. We were trucked forward to a place called Soktong Sangni.
장생리?
Yeah, Soktong Sangni.
석전산리.
Yeah.
Okay. And?
At that stage, I became an artist signaller in the command post, in the battery command post for 161 battery.
Signaler, so that's an important job.
It was a matter of recording all signal traffic that came in, and particularly with artillery, ensuring that every item was correct.
So tell me the detail. How does that work? I mean, you were in charge of all these different signals, right, for the battery. How did it work? Tell me the details so that we can understand what you did and how that was managed.
We had shifts of 8 hours, and there were a total of 4 signallers. So we always had one there as a backup in case one was out. That other signaller may also had to go forward with the forward observing officer, and at times we would receive all sorts of traffic. The main one that we would get every day at 8 o'clock in the morning and at midnight was a matter of checking the signals throughout the division. The whole division reported through. We all had our own separate call signs, so you could tick off all the units as they came in and answered.
I see.
That was the normal routine. We would then get meteorological reports. This is most important in artillery procedures for taking the flight of the projectile and the effects it has on the projectile.
Elaborate on what means by meteorological information.
The weather conditions. In fact, if you had misty weather, for instance, some of the American fuses were susceptible to going off in flight. So we'd try not to fire under those conditions because it was a danger to our own troops as well as the enemy ones if they got through.
So can be friendly fire.
Yes, yeah. Then we would receive also from the forward observing officer target information.
Yes.
Now that was the most important one. We would take the message, we would jot down the message, the time, at the same time calling it out. We then had the duty officer in the command post who would then plot that information on the map. He would then check the distance to the target and the time and judge the time of flight of the target and also the meteorological effects on the target. Once he was sure that he had that, we would also receive in what type of fire pattern was to be laid down. For instance, the main one we got would be a battery target bombard, and that meant that it was the full battery firing, and in that stage we had 3 troops of 4 guns, which meant we had 12 guns in action.
And so I feel like I'm in the headquarters, and I feel like I'm the signaler and receiving so many information from very different positions, and then give out the orders to bomb, right?
Yes.
Wow, that's a very important job. So the routine is that you wake up and you went to the headquarters, and then you do all those things. And what do you do after the main work?
Usually it was trying to get back to have a sleep, because on a lot of occasions you would overlap your time.
Yes.
Simply because of the availability of people. So we had a canteen, much like the small American PX, and or post exchange, where you could buy your necessities and secure your 2 bottles of beer per day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, go ahead. So,
there wasn't a lot of activity. Sometimes you'd get landed with some of the battery sergeant major's tasks of improving the roads in the area, finding stones to mark pathways and paint them white.
mm-hmm.
No, there was never much time for relaxation. Of course, letter writing home was another pastime. Receiving mail, of course.
Mail, yeah. So you
was another
wrote a lot
thing we
of
looked
letter,
forward
right?
to. Yes, I was married before I went.
You married?
Before I went to Korea, my first wife.
Huh. So it must have been very hard for her.
Yes, I guess so.
Mm-hmm.
But she was single. We had. She was solo. We had no children.
No children.
No children. Yeah. And she was had family. She was with family during that time.
Did you send the money to her?
You had to make a deduction immediately that you announced and had your marriage was approved by Army. You had to make a deduction.
I see. So you did it. What was the living condition there? It wasn't far front line of battle, right? You were in the rear area.
Well, we were sort of in the mid area.
Where was it?
This was in the area to the east of Panmunjom. And it was on what we called the Jamestown line. The Jamestown line.
So you were in the 161 battery, right?
Yes.
16th Field Regiment.
Yes.
And that was in the Jamestown line.
Yep.
So that was early 1953. So around that time, there was a lot of tug of war, right?
There was.
To gain more land
Yes.
between Chinese and the UN forces.
Yes.
Can you give us some sort of idea of how intense that battle was?
Well, there was only once that I actually got up in that first 6 weeks to a forward observation post to look out and sort of visualise the area that we'd been firing targets. It was a particularly busy time. In the May, in the May was it?
1953.
It was from the period of March through until the end of April 1953. There was a lot of activity going on. We were covering points such as Hill 355, known as Little Gibraltar.
Yes. Yeah.
And our coverage in that particular time, we covered that from the area from the Hook, through to 355. The 355 was the edge of our field area.
So looking back all those years, what do you think? I mean, you were in one of the most severe Battle of Hook, Hill 355. You were in the Jamestown line.
Jamestown line went from east to west.
So what do you think about all those things? Looking back all those years.
Well, we were very active. We would be firing 10 to 15 sorties each day, and some of those sorties would go on for an hour, 2 hours.
Wow.
And that involved corrections of fire, changing the types of ammunition for the particular task that was on. It was busy, very busy. And that's where the overlapping also came in. If you'd started on a fire plan, then you didn't change over your duties until that plan was finished.
How was enemy battery? Were they good?
We, in my time with 161, we never received an incoming. Though we did have one of our guns that had a had the projectile exploded just outside the mouth of the barrel, and that immediately brings in an inquiry. So those types of things, the administration, the correct military procedures have to be taken into consideration.
I see. Tell me about your service with the British tank unit.
Yes.
What happened? When was it?
On about the 1st of May, as had been arranged by the New Zealand Army, I was attached to the 1st Royal Tank Regiment.
1st
Royal Tank
Royal
Regiment,
Tank,
yes,
yeah.
Very important, the Royal Tank Regiment, who were the current armoured regiment supporting the division. I was posted to B Squadron, and initially I was under getting to know the Centurion tank for a start. Although we had a Centurion tank at that time in New Zealand, it was almost like a temple. It was only for generals to crawl around and have a look in and not for the likes of a corporal. So although we knew the details from military publications, I didn't know much about the tank. So I had 14 days.
But why were you assigned to the Royal Tank Unit even though you didn't know much about the tank?
This is because I was a tank instructor on other vehicles. And
you were a tank instructor, but you didn't know much about tank?
Not about the Centurion, no.
What do you mean by Centurion?
The Centurion was a type of tank, the British type of tank.
Specifically, you didn't know about that type of tank. I see. But you knew about tank in general.
Oh yes, tank and tank tactics.
Got it.
Yep.
So
after I became au fait with the vehicle, I was posted as a gunner, and I went up onto 355, Hill 355, as the gunner of a replacement tank for one which had been hit by a high-velocity weapon the day before, and it took the cupola off the turret of that tank.
So you were actually in Hill 355 inside of the tank?
Not that particular tank.
But you were in the tank?
Yes, in the tank.
Wow.
What we mainly did was support of the patrols that went out at night. So much of our firing was night firing, and most of it was with the coaxially mounted machine gun. We were limited by having stakes driven into the ground to prevent us the weapon from going outside the limited areas. The areas next to us became the responsibility of the other tank positions. We didn't want to. Some were forward of us, and therefore you didn't want to put one up their tail.
Were there any dangerous moment to you that you might have lost your life?
Not on that time, and there was.
When were there any?
Later on.
Where?
Yes.
When?
It's been on the Hook on the 24th, 25th of July.
And what happened?
At that stage, I was posted to the supply vehicle, which was a Centurion tank without its turret, but had two large opening doors on them, which were very heavy. And when they were down, there was one little small door in it where, as commander, I could stand and direct the driver. We had radio, they were the same, but that allowed us to carry ammunition and sometimes fuel, water, up to those tank positions that could not easily be reached by wheeled vehicles. It was about 9 o'clock at night on the 24th of July that I received a message from the commanding officer of the squadron that I should report to a check post, and this check post was the traffic control direction to the Hook position. Reached there about 11:30. We then moved forward for about 10 minutes when I test fired the Browning machine gun that was mounted on the top rail of the tank. Unwittingly, I didn't advise the driver, but the first thing he knew was he got a rain of about 10 hot shell cases down on his shoulder. And he had plenty of words to say. However, you don't go into battle without knowing that your machine guns are going to work. We then picked up a guide from the 2nd Battalion of the Royal Australian Regiment.
Yes.
And he guided us through to Hill 111, and that was an area that was occupied by the machine gun section, the machine gun platoon of 2 RAR. I knew that there I had to pick up 2 wounded personnel from the Australians. We'd had a lot of heavy rain, so of course the Jeep ambulances just couldn't handle the conditions with the rain. So we got into Hill 111, and all the time the battle was raging as we were going up. The battle was raging as we got there, and it continued until we got out of there. Now, instead of it being a quick load and get away, I suddenly found that we had another 6 US Marines who had been wounded. And they had been brought through to the Australian machine gunners. And during that time we had 3 barrages of mortar came in where we had to take cover. We finally got them all mounted up by about between midnight and 1 o'clock, and then pulled back out of the area, back to the we went back to the Australian regimental aid post, where we transferred the Australians and the Americans to their own services.
So you successfully transport them?
Yeah.
Were there real danger to yourself doing that mission?
Yeah.
Were you wounded?
No.
Not at all?
No.
You're lucky.
Yes.
But you saved...
The whole crew came through, and although we had 2 stretcher cases for the top of the tank, and they were laying alongside the tank because we had to get those that could get inside in first, and then the 2 to go on top. But neither of the 2 stretcher cases received any injuries during that time. What was amazing to me was that here I was under the fire of the battery that I was a signaller in before I went to the tanks. So I could safely tell them that I had intense faith in them. Yes, they did a really good job that night.
Yeah. You should be recognized with a medal for that.
No, I was with a British unit.
Yeah.
And
they never award?
I remember one of the other New Zealanders coming down. He was a Sergeant Harry Russell, who just died recently. And Harry said, "You had a big night the other night, Les." And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Oh, well, I heard there might be a medal in it." But nothing came through. Yes.
Any other episode you think it was really critical during your service?
No, I don't think so, because 2 days later, 2 days later, I had to go back up with the tank to bring out any usable material that we could have from our positions to bring back to the new line of resistance. And it was the 28th I arrived at 111 again, and the Hook. It was a mess. And I still thought about, ages later, I used to have dreams about it. It was littered with half bodies. The stench was unbelievable. Some of them had barbed wire been pushed through their bodies. And what really upset me was that there were a couple of Marines there going through the pockets of the dead Chinese. I thought, then again, they could have been trying to gather information. But I would say at that particular point, there were 150 on the ground, dead. Amid the wire, on the wire.
But July 27, we signed the armistice.
Correct.
Yeah.
The bodies hadn't been recovered at that stage. There was another attack on the night of the 26th.
Mm-hmm.
On the night of the 25th.
Yeah.
And by the 26th, they knew that something was coming up, but no bodies were retained from the field. They just had to lay there.
So tell me about those things that you brought. So this is the area where you were, Samichon River.
Yes.
On the northeast.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Hook was right there.
Where the blue line goes round.
Yes.
Yes.
And the first Commonwealth British, the brigade, they were there.
The one Commonwealth division.
Yes.
Yep.
And then what is Royal?
It's the 2nd Battalion Royal Australian Regiment.
Uh-huh. And red symbols represent known Chinese defense works, May 28, 1953. Yeah.
That's all the tunnels, trenches, and known intelligence of the Chinese positions.
Positions were there?
Yep.
So what did you do about it? What our forces do about it?
We couldn't do much about it except airstrikes. Lots of airstrikes took place there.
Yes.
Lots of active patrolling between the two boundaries, the boundaries of the enemy and the boundaries of the Commonwealth.
So by looking at all those maps, I mean the positions there in the map,
Yes.
What do you think? Is it like daydreaming, or do you still feel really real? What do you think?
It's back there. Each time you look at it, it's back there.
So you were really in the middle of this important battle in the Hook, right?
Yes. Around that way.
Yes. So where is Hill 355?
Hill 355
Is there?
is on the next Marjorie map.
Okay.
But Hill... It's difficult for me to read it upside down. I'll just point it out to you now.
Any other important location?
That is a tank position there
Uh-huh.
that I
You were there?
occupied at one stage. Yes,
Yeah.
looking straight across the Semichan.
Right there.
Yep. And Hill 111 is right there.
Hill 111.
Yep.
So just in the right side of the Chinese, right?
It was right on the edge of our
Got it.
line of resistance. Yep.
Yes. And what else did you bring?
Oh, while this one's out, it's later. From my latest service in Vietnam.
Oh, that was in Vietnam.
Yeah.
So you were in Vietnam War too.
Yep.
Okay. And
There we were in Phuc Toi province,
yes.
and at a spot called Nui Dat. This is the first tank I went to on 355.
Yes.
Tank name is Bardia. This is myself here, and we're doing a kit check to make sure that we're all up to scratch.
Yes.
This is the tank that was used on the night of the 24th, 25th of July to evacuate the wounded, and the head showing out of there was actually my radio operator, and by the name of Taffy Morris. And 25 years later, here he is at his home in Wales.
England.
Wales, England, yes, where we met during the time I was back for a reunion.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful.
There is a full view of a Centurion tank.
I see.
These are some of the things, some pictures of our positions.
Yeah.
How are they? A typical tank position.
Yeah. Yes. Did you take that picture?
No, these are file pictures that I got for an artist who I got to do a painting. A little up straight,
Yes.
Okay. That one okay?
Yes. Look at that. Okay.
And that's where we stop on that.
Okay. Have you been back to Korea?
Yes, I've been back to Korea. I went the first time in 1995, and it was with the Veterans Program, which we spent the six nights in Korea, and of course we were escorted everywhere that we went.
So you were invited by the Ministry of Patriots and Veterans Affairs?
Yes.
Yes.
But at that stage, at 1995, it was being run by the Veterans Affairs,
yes.
Korean Veterans Association. Yes.
So when you see the Korea again and Seoul, What was the difference? Tell me the detail.
Amazing that the country could turn into such a myriad of high-rise apartments from one end of the country to the other, in these in what must have been hamlets rather during the war. Everyone was right on the ball with timing. The whole place looked like it was a well-run factory.
How did you feel about it?
Wonderful. Wonderful that we were able to take part in something that allowed that nation to, Korea, to reassert itself within the world.
That's very nice to see all those good things came out of your service, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. I returned also in 2010 as a guest of the government. A party of 3 from the Korean Veterans Association were invited, including Diana came with me.
Oh.
Invited to the 60th commemoration service, and that was really, really, really well done. The only problem was that we didn't get to go other than to the observation post outside of just outside of Seoul. And that day was an extremely blue atmosphere, and you couldn't really see into the north. But we had a wonderful dinner at the Reunification Centre. You went to Lottie. Yeah. And at that time, I had a long conversation with the British Duke of Gloucester. So we mixed with royalty.
Yeah, next year will be the 70th anniversary of the breakout of the Korean War. Do you have any special message to the Korean people?
I think that the Korean people have done marvellously from what we saw in 1953-54 to what we see today. Shows an unexpected drive into industry. And one thing that I really did see there was they were getting back into the shipbuilding. And on the blocks they had one of the new super tankers ready to be completed. They have also made their mark amongst the world.
So, what would you say to the Korean people?
Well done. Very well done.
Yeah, and you did a good job to provide the opportunity to rebuild it, right?
And a big thank you also for making available these return visits to Korea. I believe that they may stop after 2020.
Yeah. It's hard for the veteran themselves to go take a flight, like 10 hours, straight.
Yes.
So it's getting hard, but we want to preserve your memory and make it available for classroom activities on history of the Korea. So that's why we're going to work with the teachers in New Zealand, and we'll continue to work for the legacy of your honorable service.
from 1995 of receiving the Ambassador of Peace.
Yeah, Ambassador Peace Medal.
Island there.
Yes. Great. Thank you. Early 1953 until the armistice was signed. And I would like to thank you again for your fight, and we'll make sure that your interviews to be heard among the young New Zealand students.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So show me the picture, please.
There is the picture. It has a frame. The frame is in metal, and you'll notice that there are nuts showing to show it from a tank. In there gives an artist's impression of the typical layout. The artist also has. The artist was also a New Zealand representative in Korea.
And that's the...
This picture was then presented at a meeting with the Chief of the General Staff of New Zealand, Major General Mata Pye, and this is the handing over of the painting. And the painting was first displayed in Army General Staff, and in future it was to be part of the New Zealand Army Memorial Museum.
Excellent. Excellent.
Okay. And now there's something like... All right. The painting was commissioned in honour of Corporal Brian Cook, who lost his life in May 1952 during a bombardment of the 5th Inniskillen Dragoon Guards Tank Regiment.
Great.
Again, the general, the author.
Beautiful.
For all my service to the New Zealand Army during 32 years, these are the medals that were awarded. Here is Korea.
That's very honorable. Was awarded by the Koreans in Auckland?
Yes.
Good. They did a nice job. Great.